My name is Liam, and for 36 years, I've been the ghost at my family's feast. Not the scary kind, but the kind you forget is even there until you need someone to pass the salt. Last week, however, they decided they didn't even need the salt. It was a Tuesday. The sky outside my office window was the color of slate, and my phone buzzed with the familiar, slightly imperious ringtone I had assigned to my mother, Eleanor. I almost let it go to voicemail. I was in the middle of reviewing blueprints for a sustainable community project that had consumed my life for the past 2 years. But a familiar sense of familial obligation, worn smooth like a river stone from decades of use, had me swiping to answer. "Hey, Mom," I said, my voice warmer than the feeling in my gut. Her voice came through the speaker, crisp and bright, the way it always did when she was organizing something. "Liam, darling, I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. You know how hectic things get before the holidays." I could hear the faint clinking of ice in a glass and knew she was already enjoying her 4 o'clock Chardonnay. I leaned back in my chair, the worn leather groaning in protest. My office wasn't the gleaming high-rise my father, Richard, or my brother Ethan occupied. It was a converted barn on the edge of my property, filled with drafting tables, topographical maps, and the earthy smell of sawdust and fresh coffee. I built things with my hands. I worked with the land, a concept so foreign to my family it might as well have been a different language. To them, success was a stock portfolio, a corner office with a view of the city skyline, not dirt under your fingernails. "Just going over some plans," I said vaguely. "What's up?" She paused for dramatic effect, a classic Eleanor move. "Well, we've decided to do something a little different for Christmas this year. Your father has been working so incredibly hard, and with Ethan's big promotion to senior vice president, we thought a proper celebration was in order. Something exclusive." The way she said exclusive was laced with a particular kind of pride, the kind that was meant to create a velvet rope between us and the rest of the world. "We've booked the Alpine Suite at the Street Regis in Aspen," she continued, her voice practically purring. "It's for the entire week of Christmas. Private chef. Ski-in divided by ski-out access. The works." Chloe is absolutely beside herself. She's already planning her outfits for the gram. Chloe, my younger sister, measured her life in likes and sponsored posts. Her reality was a carefully curated grid of luxury, funded entirely by my father. I stayed silent, a cold knot forming in my stomach. I knew what was coming. It was the same feeling I got in the 5th grade when I wasn't invited to the popular kid's birthday party, only this time it was from my own mother. "It's going to be a wonderful, intimate family getaway," she said. And then came the hammer blow, delivered with the casual breeziness of a weather report. "It's just for the 4 of us, of course. It's really a celebration for Ethan, and the suite is just, well, you understand. It's about presenting the right image." I didn't say anything. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. I could hear her take a delicate sip from her glass. The right image. For 20 years, I had been the wrong image. I was the son who didn't go into finance, the son who traded tailored suits for flannel shirts and work boots. I was the one who bought hundreds of acres of undeveloped land in Wyoming when they thought I should be buying a condo in the city. My work was too tangible, too rustic. It didn't photograph well for Chloe's feed, or sound impressive at my father's country club dinners. "Liam, are you there, darling?" My mother's voice chirped, a hint of impatience creeping in. I finally found my own. "Yeah, Mom, I'm here." My voice was flat, devoid of the emotion churning inside me. "I understand." It was a lie. I didn't understand. Or rather, I understood all too well. This wasn't about the size of a hotel suite. This was a statement. I was not part of the brand they were building. My success, quiet and substantial as it was the wrong kind of success. "Wonderful. I knew you'd be mature about it," she said, the relief in her voice making it even worse. "We'll be sure to FaceTime you on Christmas morning. You can see all the snow. And of course, your gift is already on its way from Neiman Marcus. She said it as if a luxury gift could patch the hole she had just blown through my chest, as if a cashmere sweater could replace a seat at the table. We exchanged a few more pleasantries, the conversation a hollow dance of practiced denial. I promised to have a quiet Christmas at home, and she promised to send lots of pictures. When I hung up the phone, I didn't move for a long time. The blueprints on my desk, plans for homes meant to foster community and connection, seemed to mock me. I stared out the window as the gray sky deepened, watching the first snowflakes of the season begin to drift down, blanketing the vast, silent landscape of my ranch. The ranch my family had once called Liam's Folly, the $8 million folly they knew nothing about. An idea, cold and sharp as an icicle, began to form in my mind. They wanted an exclusive Christmas? Fine, so would I. But my guest list would be a little different, and when they found out, the calls would begin. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, if you know what it's like to be valued for what you can provide rather than who you are, then you're going to want to see how this story unfolds. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because this is the story of how I took my family's rejection and turned it into a Christmas they would never, ever forget. The silence in my office after that call was deafening. It was a silence filled with the ghosts of 1,000 little slights, 1,000 moments of being overlooked, of being told in subtle and not so subtle ways that I was not enough. For years, I had swallowed the hurt. I'd told myself it didn't matter. I'd channeled my frustration and my ambition into my work, into this land. I had poured every ounce of myself into creating something real, something lasting, far from the ephemeral world of stock prices and social media metrics that my family worshipped. And what had it gotten me? A perfunctory phone call excluding me from the one time of year that is supposed to be about family, about togetherness. My father, Richard, had a favorite saying: "You can't build a legacy with a hammer and nails." He meant it as a jab at my profession, a dismissal of my life's work in favor of my brother Ethan's career, which involved moving numbers around on a screen. But as I sat there, the faint scent of pine from the surrounding forest drifting into my office, I looked at the empire I had built, and I knew he was wrong. A legacy isn't just a number in a bank account. It's the land you nurture, the homes you build, the community you foster. It's something you can touch, something that will stand long after you're gone. And that brought my thoughts to the ranch. Serenity Peak Ranch. The name had come to me one evening as I stood on the very spot where my house now stood, watching the sunset paint the jagged peaks of the Teton Range in shades of orange and violet. It was 1,200 acres of rolling hills, dense pine forests, and wide-open meadows, with the Snake River carving a path through its heart. I had bought the land 10 years ago with the first significant payout from a risky commercial development deal I'd spearheaded. My family had been appalled. Wyoming? My father had bellowed over the phone. "What on God's green earth is in Wyoming? You've thrown your money away on a pile of dirt and rocks, son." Ethan had just laughed, calling it my cowboy fantasy. They saw a wasteland. I saw a canvas. Over the next decade, I poured my soul into it. I used my own development company, my own crews, to design and build the main lodge. It wasn't a house. It was a testament. It was crafted from reclaimed timber and local river stone, with vast floor-to-ceiling windows that blurred the line between inside and out. It had 8 master suites, each with its own fireplace and private balcony, a commercial-grade kitchen, a dining hall with a table that could seat 30, a state-of-the-art theater, a library filled with books I'd collected from my travels, and a great room dominated by a massive stone fireplace that could have roasted an entire ox. Outside, there was a heated stable with a dozen horses, miles of groomed trails for riding and snowmobiling, a private ice rink on a frozen pond, and a fully stocked trout stream for the truly dedicated fishermen. I had built it not as a monument to my wealth, but as a sanctuary, a place for peace, for reflection, for connection with nature. It was my secret, my refuge from a world that had always made me feel like I was on the outside looking in. And the total investment, land and construction, had recently been appraised at just north of $8 million. Not a bad return for a pile of dirt and rocks. As the idea that had sparked in my mind began to catch fire, I stood up and walked to the large topographical map of the property pinned to my wall. My family wanted to celebrate Ethan's success. They wanted to create an image of a perfect, elite family vacation. They had drawn a circle and deliberately placed me outside of it, so I would draw a bigger circle, a better one filled with warmth and laughter and genuine connection, all the things their sterile, status-obsessed trip to Aspen would lack. I picked up my phone, my fingers hovering over my contacts list. Who were the other ghosts at the feast? Who were the other people my parents kept at arm's length? The relatives deemed not quite polished enough, not quite wealthy enough, not quite right for the perfect Addams family portrait. My Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, a warm, boisterous art teacher who lived in a small, paint-splattered bungalow in Oregon. She had been a second mother to me when I was a child, but my parents kept her at a distance, embarrassed by her bohemian lifestyle. And her husband, my Uncle David, a cheerful, bearded carpenter. Then there were my cousins. Maya, Carol's daughter, a brilliant but struggling musician in Nashville. Mark and Sarah, my father's brother's kids, who had taken over their dad's small hardware store in Vermont after he passed away. Good, honest, hard-working people who were always sent a polite, generic Christmas card, but never an invitation to the main event. They were the roots of the family tree, the foundation my parents seemed so desperate to forget in their climb to the top branches. The plan crystallized with beautiful, simple clarity. I wasn't going to have a quiet Christmas. I was going to host the Christmas to end all Christmases. Right here, at Serenity Peak, I would fly everyone out. I would give them a week of luxury and adventure they would never forget. I would fill this lodge with the family that deserved to be celebrated. And I would make sure my parents, my brother, and my sister saw every single moment of it. The first call wouldn't be to them. It would be to my ranch manager, a grizzled old cowboy named Gus, who knew this land better than I did. Then it would be to a private charter company. Then to a catering firm in Jackson Hole. I had less than 3 weeks to pull it off. But as I stood there, looking out at the snow falling on my folly, I felt a surge of energy, a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about reclamation. I was reclaiming my worth, my success, and the very definition of family. The Addams family was about to have a Christmas reunion. It just wouldn't be the one my parents had planned. The first phone call I made wasn't easy. Not because of the logistics, but because of the vulnerability. For years, I had kept my success under wraps, a closely guarded secret. Admitting the scale of what I had built meant opening myself up to the family I felt had been pushed to the margins right alongside me. It meant admitting, in a way, that I had been hiding. But the sting of my mother's words was a powerful antidote to my apprehension. I dialed my Aunt Carol's number, my heart thumping a little faster than usual. She picked up on the second ring, her voice a welcome, chaotic gust of warmth. "Liam, honey, is that you? I was just thinking about you. I saw a documentary about sustainable architecture and told David, that sounds just like our Liam." I couldn't help but smile. She was the only one who ever took a genuine interest in the specifics of my work. "Hey, Aunt Carol. You're not going to believe the kind of sustainable architecture I've been working on." I took a deep breath and launched into it. I told her everything. About the phone call with my mother. About Aspen. About being excluded. I didn't sugarcoat it. I let the raw hurt show in my voice. She listened patiently, the silence on her end of the line a comforting blanket. When I finished, I could hear her sigh, a sound heavy with a familiar disappointment. "Oh, Liam, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice laced with empathy. "Your mother. Eleanor gets so caught up in appearances, she always has. It's not about you, honey, not really. It's about her own insecurities. Her words were a balm, but I knew I needed to get to the point before I lost my nerve. "Well, I've decided to do something about it," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I'm not going to sit here and feel sorry for myself. I was wondering, what are you and Uncle David doing for Christmas?" I could almost hear her shrug through the phone. "Oh, the usual. A quiet dinner here. Maybe watch It's a Wonderful Life for the 100th time." "Why?" This was it. "Because I would like to fly you both out to Wyoming to spend the week with me. All expenses paid. I have a place here. A big place. Plenty of room." The silence that followed was different this time. It was filled with shock, confusion, and a hint of disbelief. "Wyoming? Liam, that's incredibly sweet, but we couldn't possibly impose. A flight at this time of year would be a fortune." "Aunt Carol," I said, cutting her off gently, "please, just let me do this. It wouldn't be an imposition, it would be a favor. I don't want to be alone for Christmas." I hated using that line, but I knew it was the only one that would break through her protests. The idea of me being alone would be more than her motherly heart could bear. I heard her cover the phone, her muffled voice calling out, "David, get in here! You are not going to believe this." A few moments of chaotic whispering later, she was back on the line, her voice filled with a giddy excitement. "Liam, are you serious? A big place? What kind of big place are we talking about?" I chuckled, and for the first time, described Serenity Peak Ranch to a family member. I told her about the lodge, the suites, the horses, the view of the mountains. With every detail, her gasps grew louder. By the time I was finished, she was practically speechless. "My God, Liam, it sounds like a palace, a rustic palace." David's eyes are as wide as saucers. He wants to know if you need any custom cabinetry built. We both laughed, and in that moment, the weight on my shoulders felt a little lighter. "Just pack your warmest clothes and your paintbrushes," I told her. "I'll have a car service pick you up from the airport in Jackson Hole. I'm sending the tickets to your email right now." The next call was to my cousin Maya in Nashville. She was a phenomenal singer-songwriter, with a voice that could break your heart and a talent for lyrics that was second to none. But the music industry is a brutal one, and she was barely scraping by, playing gigs in smoky bars and working as a waitress to pay her rent. We had always been close, kindred spirits who had chosen the artist's path over the corporate one. She answered the phone with a weary, "Liam, is everything okay? You never call on a weekday." I gave her the same story, the same invitation. Her reaction was different from her mother's. It was a stunned, protracted silence, followed by a single whispered word. "Seriously?" She was used to disappointment, to doors being slammed in her face. The idea of an all-expenses-paid luxury vacation was so far outside her reality that she couldn't quite process it. "Maya, I am 100% serious," I assured her. "And you have to bring your guitar. The great room has incredible acoustics. That's what did it." The thought of playing her music in a new, beautiful space. I could hear the tears in her voice as she accepted. "Liam, I don't know what to say. This has been the hardest year. I was just trying to figure out how I was going to afford a Christmas tree." "Don't worry about the tree," I said. "I've got a whole forest of them." "Oh, what?" The final calls were to my cousins Mark and Sarah in Vermont. They were running the hardware store our grandfather had started, working 12-hour days just to keep it afloat in the age of big-box retailers. They were grounded, no-nonsense New Englanders, and their reaction was one of practical disbelief. "Wyoming?" Mark said, his Vermont accent thick. "Liam, we can't just close the store for a week before Christmas. That's our busiest time." "I know it's a big ask," I said, "but I wouldn't be asking if it wasn't important. And I'd be willing to compensate you for the lost business for the week." There was a long pause. I had crossed a line, turning a family invitation into a business transaction, but I knew it was the only way they would even consider it. "How much compensation are we talking about?" Sarah asked, her voice cautious but intrigued. I named a number that I knew was double what they would make in their best week. The silence on their end was profound. "You'd do that?" Mark finally asked, his voice laced with awe. "For family," I said simply. By the end of the day, I had a guest list: Aunt Carol and Uncle David, Maya, Mark, and Sarah. A small group, but they were the right group. They were the family who had always shown up for me, even if it was just with a phone call or a supportive word. As I emailed the final flight confirmations, a sense of rightness settled over me. This was more than just a party. It was a realignment. I was creating a new center of gravity for our family, one based not on wealth or status, but on loyalty and love. Now, all that was left was to plan a Christmas that would make Aspen look like a cheap motel. With the guest list confirmed, a switch flipped inside me. The hurt and anger that had been simmering since my mother's call morphed into a laser-focused operational drive. I was a developer, a builder. My entire career was about taking a concept, a blueprint, and turning it into a tangible reality. This Christmas was now the most important project of my life, and I was going to execute it with flawless precision. My first call was to Gus, my ranch manager. He was a man of few words and immense capability, a former rodeo champion whose family had been in this valley for 5 generations. He picked up with his usual gruff, "Liam." "Gus," I said, getting straight to the point. "We're hosting Christmas at the ranch. I've got 5 guests flying in on the 22nd and staying through the 28th. I need the ranch to be perfect." I could hear him chewing on something, probably tobacco. "Define perfect, son." I spent the next 20 minutes defining it. I wanted every suite not just clean, but immaculate. I wanted roaring fires in every fireplace, every day. I wanted the stables ready, the horses groomed and saddled for daily rides. I wanted the snowmobiles gassed up and lined in a perfect row. I wanted the ice rink on the pond cleared, smoothed, and lit with fairy lights for night skating. And I wanted Christmas trees. Not just one, but several. A towering 20-footer for the great room, and smaller, elegant ones for the dining hall and the library. Gus just listened, occasionally grunting in affirmation. When I was done, he simply said, "Consider it done. You want the good whiskey stocked in the bar?" I laughed. "Stock the best of everything, Gus. Spare no expense." That became my mantra for the next 2 weeks. Spare no expense. This wasn't about showing off my wealth in the same gaudy way my family did. It was about showing care. It was about using my resources to create an experience of such profound warmth and generosity that it would stand in stark, undeniable contrast to the cold, transactional nature of their Aspen trip. My next call was to a woman named Isabel, the owner of a boutique catering and event planning company in Jackson Hole. Her company was renowned for creating magical, high-end experiences. "Isabel," I said, after introducing myself, "I have a last-minute, challenging, and I hope, exciting project for you." I laid out my vision. I didn't just want meals. I wanted culinary events. A welcome dinner featuring local game. A Christmas Eve feast of the 7 fishes, nodding to an old tradition. A Christmas morning brunch with a mimosa and Bloody Mary bar. A grand Christmas dinner that was both elegant and comforting. And I wanted the lodge decorated. Not with store-bought Santas, but with natural elements from the ranch itself. Pine boughs, holly branches, aspen leaves sprayed gold. I wanted it to feel like the wilderness had been invited inside to celebrate. Isabel was, thankfully, intrigued by the challenge. "This is an insane timeline, Mr. Morgan," she said, her voice a mix of professional stress and creative excitement. "But I love it. It's authentic. We can do this. But it will cost you." "I'm aware," I said. "Your budget is my last concern. Your creativity is my first." With the food and decor handled, I moved on to the gifts. This was the part I was most looking forward to. For years, I had received impersonal, expensive gifts from my family: a designer watch I never wore, a crystal decanter that collected dust. They were gifts that said, "I spent money on you," not "I know you." My gifts for my guests would be different. For Aunt Carol, I commissioned a custom-made solid oak artist's easel from a local craftsman and stocked a beautiful leather satchel with the finest German and Italian paints and brushes. For Uncle David, a man who appreciated quality tools, I ordered a complete set of Japanese woodworking chisels, tools so sharp and perfectly balanced they were considered works of art. For my cousins, Mark and Sarah, who had sacrificed so much for their family store, I opened a brokerage account in their names and funded it with a substantial amount of stock in blue-chip companies. It was a nest egg, a thank you for their hard work, and a way to give them the financial security my father had never offered his own brother. And for Maya, I made a call to a friend who was a legendary music producer in Los Angeles. I sent him a few of the demo tracks she had sent me over the years. The producer was impressed. I booked and paid for a week of professional recording time in his L.A. studio for her, scheduled for the spring. Her gift would be a plane ticket and the opportunity of a lifetime. I arranged all of this in a whirlwind of phone calls and emails, my mind sharp and clear. As I worked, I couldn't help but contrast my own busy, joyful preparations with what must be happening in my parents' world. I imagined my mother on the phone with the Street Regis concierge, making sure they had the right vintage of champagne. I imagined Chloe in a panic-induced shopping spree, buying thousands of dollars worth of ski-chic outfits. I imagined Ethan bragging to his colleagues about his exclusive family holiday. Their preparations were all about the external, about image, status, and what other people would think. Mine were about the internal, about thought, care, and what my family would feel. On the 21st of December, the day before everyone was due to arrive, I did a final walkthrough of the lodge with Gus. It was breathtaking. Isabel and her team had worked miracles. The whole lodge smelled of fresh pine and cinnamon. The great room was dominated by the enormous Christmas tree, decorated with hundreds of twinkling white lights and hand-blown glass ornaments shaped like woodland creatures. Every surface was adorned with elegant, rustic arrangements. A fire crackled in every hearth. The dining table was set for a feast. It was perfect. "Well, son," Gus said, clapping me on the shoulder, "looks like you're ready for Christmas." I nodded, a deep sense of satisfaction washing over me. "I think so, Gus. I think we are." That night, I couldn't sleep. I was too excited, too anxious. I kept thinking about my parents. I wondered if they felt any guilt, any regret. A small, foolish part of me still hoped they would call, that they would change their minds. But the phone remained silent. And as I finally drifted off to sleep, I knew it was for the best. The stage was set. The players were on their way. The story was about to truly begin. The morning of December 22nd dawned cold and brilliantly clear. A fresh blanket of snow had fallen overnight, and the entire ranch was draped in a pristine, glittering white. The air was so crisp it felt like you could snap it in half. I was up before the sun, my boots crunching on the packed snow as I walked from the main lodge to the stables. The horses, sensing my approach, nickered softly, their breath pluming in the frigid air. There was a nervous energy thrumming just beneath my skin, the kind you get before a big presentation, or in my case, the unveiling of a life's work to the people who mattered most. Gus was already there, forking hay into the stalls. He just nodded at me, a silent acknowledgement that today was the day. The first flight, carrying Aunt Carol and Uncle David, was scheduled to land at the small private airfield in Jackson Hole at 11 a.m. I had arranged for a luxury SUV, driven by one of Gus's most trusted ranch hands, to meet them. I wanted their experience to be seamless from the moment they stepped off the plane. I spent the morning in a flurry of last-minute checks. I personally inspected each of the guest suites, making sure the fires were lit, the minibars were stocked with their favorite drinks I'd called ahead to find out, and that the welcome baskets were in place. Each basket contained plush robes, slippers, handmade local soaps, a selection of books I thought they'd enjoy, and a handwritten note from me, welcoming them to the ranch. It was the details that mattered. The details were the difference between luxury and love. Just before noon, the SUV pulled up the long, winding driveway to the lodge. I stood on the massive front porch, my heart pounding a familiar, anxious rhythm. As the doors opened, Aunt Carol emerged, bundled in a colorful, hand-knitted scarf. She stopped dead in her tracks, her eyes wide as she took in the scale of the lodge, the smoke curling from the stone chimneys, the vast, silent wilderness stretching out behind it. Uncle David got out behind her, his mouth literally hanging open. "Liam?" Aunt Carol whispered, as if she wasn't sure it was really me. This is your place?" I grinned, the anxiety melting away, replaced by a profound sense of pride and joy. "Welcome to Serenity Peak," I said. The moment she wrapped me in a hug, the familiar scent of turpentine and peppermint filling my senses, I knew I had done the right thing. The rest of the day was a blur of happy arrivals. Maya got in that afternoon, her guitar case slung over her shoulder and a look of absolute wonder on her face. She walked into the great room, looked up at the soaring, cathedral-like ceilings, and just whispered, "Whoa." Mark and Sarah arrived last, just as the sun was setting, their faces etched with the weariness of a long travel day, but their eyes shining with a quiet awe. That first dinner was something I will never forget. We gathered around the long, beautifully set dining table, the fire roaring in the hearth beside us. Isabel's team served a meal of pan-seared elk loin, roasted root vegetables, and a rich huckleberry reduction. The conversation was easy and filled with laughter. Uncle David told stories of his woodworking projects. Mark and Sarah talked about the quirky characters who frequented their hardware store. And Aunt Carol, true to form, managed to get a dab of sauce on her cheek within the first 10 minutes. For the first time, I saw Maya truly relax. The constant tension that lined her face in Nashville was gone, replaced by a soft, hopeful glow. After dinner, she shyly took out her guitar and perched on a stool near the fireplace. She played for us. Her voice, clear and hauntingly beautiful, filled the vast space, the notes echoing off the high wooden beams. She sang songs of heartbreak, hope, and the long road home. When she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Later that evening, after everyone else had turned in, I sat by the fire with Aunt Carol. "You've done well, Liam," she said softly, staring into the flames. "More than well. This place, it's not just a house, it's a home. I see your heart in every piece of it." I felt a lump form in my throat. "I just wanted to build something that couldn't be taken away," I admitted. "Something real." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "You did it. But you know, the house is just wood and stone. The real thing you've built is this." She gestured around the quiet room, at the empty chairs where we had all sat together. "You brought family together. The real family." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, just watching the fire. The lodge was quiet, filled with the soft breathing of a house full of people who felt safe and welcomed and loved. Before she went to bed, she turned to me with a mischievous glint in her eye. "You know, your sister Chloe has been posting up a storm from Aspen. All pictures of champagne glasses and designer ski suits. It all looks very cold." I pulled out my phone, something I hadn't done all evening. She was right. Chloe's Instagram story was a blizzard of manufactured luxury. A video of the sterile white-on-white hotel suite. A boomerang of clinking champagne flutes captioned "Aspen Vibes." A carefully posed photo of her and Ethan in matching Moncler jackets, looking more like models in a catalog than siblings. I scrolled through them, and for the first time, felt not a sting of jealousy, but a wave of pity. They were trying so hard to perform happiness. We were just living it. As I was about to put my phone away, a news notification flashed across the screen. It was from a National Weather Service. Massive winter storm warning issued for the Rocky Mountains. Significant snowfall and blizzard conditions expected to impact Colorado starting Christmas Eve through Christmas Day. Travel will be difficult or impossible. A slow smile spread across my face. It seemed Mother Nature had her own plans for the perfect Addams Family Christmas. Christmas Eve morning at Serenity Peak was pure magic. We woke to a world remade, another foot of fresh powder having fallen overnight. The sky was a piercing, cloudless blue, and the sunlight on the snow was so bright it was almost blinding. The energy in the lodge was electric. After a hearty breakfast of pancakes and bacon, we all bundled up and headed outside. It was like watching a group of kids who had been let out of school for a snow day. Uncle David, a man who I'd only ever seen covered in sawdust, was the first one to start a snowball fight, landing a perfectly aimed shot right on Mark's back. Soon, it was an all-out war, with shrieks of laughter echoing through the silent forest. I taught Maya how to snowmobile, her initial terror giving way to exhilarated whoops as she sped across the open meadow, a plume of snow trailing behind her. Aunt Carol, meanwhile, had set up her new easel on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, and was trying to capture the impossible beauty of the snow-covered peaks, her face a mask of intense concentration. In the afternoon, we all gathered at the ice rink. I had a massive thermos of hot chocolate, generously spiked with peppermint schnapps for the adults, and we spent hours skating, or in most of our cases, stumbling and laughing under the vast Wyoming sky. Mark and Sarah, who had grown up skating on frozen ponds in Vermont, glided around effortlessly, holding hands like teenagers. It was a simple, perfect day. There were no schedules, no expectations, no need to perform. We were just a family, enjoying each other's company, making memories. As evening approached, we came back inside, cheeks flushed from the cold, to the incredible aroma of Isabel's Christmas Eve feast. The dining hall was lit entirely by candles, casting a warm, flickering glow on our faces. We feasted on lobster bisque, baked clams, and a whole roasted branzino, the conversation flowing as easily as the wine. After dinner, we gathered in the great room for my favorite part of the day, the gift exchange. It wasn't a chaotic free-for-all. We took our time, each person opening one gift, with everyone else's full attention. The reactions were everything I had hoped for. Aunt Carol cried when she saw the easel and the paints. Uncle David held the Japanese chisels with the reverence of a museum curator. Mark and Sarah stared at the brokerage statement in stunned silence, their eyes welling with tears as the reality of what it meant for their future sank in. And when Maya opened the folder containing the confirmation for her week of studio time in LA, she just stared at it, her face pale. She read it once, then twice. Then she slowly stood up, walked over to me, and wrapped me in a fierce, trembling hug. "You believe in me," she whispered in my ear, her voice thick with emotion. Nobody's ever believed in me like this. In that moment, surrounded by the quiet joy of the people I loved, I felt a sense of fulfillment so profound it almost hurt. This was real. This was what mattered. This was the legacy my father could never understand. It was only later, when everyone had gone to bed and the lodge was quiet again, that I allowed myself to check my phone. My curiosity was a nagging itch I had to scratch. I wanted to see the other side of the story. Chloe's Instagram was a nightmare. Her early posts from the day were still full of bravado pictures of the ski slopes, a selfie captioned, "White Christmas," but the tone had shifted dramatically in the last few hours. The blizzard had clearly hit Aspen with full force. Her latest post was a video taken from the window of their suite. You couldn't see anything but a swirling vortex of white. The wind howled so loudly it was distorted by the phone's microphone. The caption read, "Blizzard lockdown. Power's been flickering and all the roads are closed. So much for our dinner reservations at Matsuhisa. Number Aspen problems, number trapped." The hashtag felt particularly pathetic. Then I saw a post from my cousin Maya. She had posted a single beautiful photo to her own small Instagram account. It was a picture of all of us, taken earlier in the evening, sitting around the fireplace, faces glowing with warmth and laughter. Her guitar was leaning against her chair. Her caption was simple. My cousin Liam gave me the best Christmas gift I could ever imagine. A chance. Feeling so grateful for real family and real magic tonight in Wyoming. My heart is full. The contrast was so stark, so utterly complete. It was almost poetic. On one side, a curated performance of luxury that had crumbled at the first sign of inconvenience, leaving them trapped, bored, and complaining in a gilded cage. On the other, a genuine experience of connection and joy, completely insulated from the storm outside. One was an image, the other was a feeling. I screenshotted Maya's post. Then I screenshotted Chloe's. I sent Maya's picture to my mother, my father, Ethan, and Chloe in a group text. I didn't add any words. I didn't need to. The picture said everything. I turned off my phone, banked the fire for the night, and went to bed. For the first time in my adult life on Christmas Eve, I felt completely at peace. The storm was raging in the mountains of Colorado, but here in my sanctuary, all was calm, all was bright. Christmas morning in Aspen, as I later pieced together from the flurry of angry texts and one tearful late-night call from Chloe, was a portrait of misery. They woke up not to the gentle glow of a winter wonderland, but to the oppressive silence of a power outage. The street Regis, for all its five-star glory, was at the mercy of the elements. The backup generators kept the emergency lights on, but the heating was intermittent. The Wi-Fi was down, and the private chef my mother had been so proud of was essentially useless without a fully functioning kitchen. Their grand Christmas brunch was replaced by a grim assortment of cold pastries and lukewarm coffee delivered by a harried-looking staff member. The blizzard hadn't just trapped them. It had stripped away all the layers of luxury and distraction they relied on, leaving them with nothing but each other's company. And it was proving to be a toxic combination. According to Chloe, the first major fight erupted over the lack of internet. My sister, whose entire sense of self was tied to her online presence, was having a full-blown meltdown. How am I supposed to post my Christmas Day outfit if I can't get a signal? She had apparently shrieked, pacing the cold suite in a ridiculously expensive but now utterly pointless cashmere jumpsuit. Ethan, ever the pragmatist when it came to others' problems, had scoffed at her. For God's sake, Chloe, there are bigger issues. The stock market is still open on a half day, and I can't even check my portfolio. This, of course, led my father to launch into a tirade about Ethan's work ethic, even in a blizzard, which he then tried to pivot into a lecture on Chloe's frivolous career. Maybe if you had a real job, he'd said, his voice dripping with condescension, you wouldn't be so concerned with what a bunch of strangers on the internet think of your clothes. My mother, Eleanor, had tried to play peacemaker, but her usual tactics were failing. There were no social events to plan, no wine to sip, no distractions to deploy. She was trapped in a suite with the very tensions she had spent a lifetime artfully ignoring. The situation was a pressure cooker, and the group text I had sent the night before the beautiful, happy photo from the ranch had turned the heat up to maximum. It had been dangling in their minds all morning, a silent, damning piece of evidence of the Christmas they were missing. It was Chloe who brought it up first, weaponizing it against my mother. Well, I bet Liam has internet at his stupid farm, she'd snapped. Did you see that picture? With Aunt Carol and everyone? They look so happy. It's disgusting. This opened the floodgates. He sent that to taunt us, Ethan declared, his face flushed with anger. That was a calculated move. He's rubbing it in our faces. My father, Richard, who had been staring out the window at the swirling snow, turned around slowly. The look on his face, Chloe said, was one she had never seen before. It was a mixture of fury, confusion, and something that looked suspiciously like wounded pride. What is that place, anyway? He demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Where did he get the money for a lodge like that? Is that where all his money from that land business has been going? The fact that he knew so little about my life, that he couldn't even fathom the scale of my success, was the deepest insult of all. It proved what I had always known. He had never paid attention. He had never been interested. He had simply written me off. The argument then spiraled, each of them turning on the others. Ethan accused my father of being too soft on me. My mother accused my father of pushing me away. Chloe accused Ethan of being the favorite, and at the center of it all was the ghost of my success. The undeniable proof in that one photograph that the son they had dismissed and excluded had built a world for himself that was richer and more joyful than their own. The final straw, Chloe told me, came in the late afternoon. The power was still out. They had been eating stale croissants and arguing for hours. Ethan, trying to reassert his status as the golden child, started bragging about his promotion, the very reason for the trip. He started talking about the new accounts he'd be managing, the size of his new bonus. But my father, his mood dark and cynical, began to pick his story apart. He started asking pointed, specific questions about the deal structure, about the profit margins. And under the unexpected scrutiny, Ethan's story began to crumble. It turned out the senior vice president title was a minor departmental promotion, not the major leap he had portrayed. The bonus was a fraction of what he had implied. He had exaggerated, embellished, and outright lied, all to secure his position as the worthy heir and justify this extravagant, exclusive trip. My father, a man to whom legacy and truth in business were paramount, was incandescent with rage. The celebration was a sham. The entire trip was built on a lie. They were trapped in a blizzard, in a cold hotel suite, celebrating nothing. It was in that moment of complete and utter collapse, with her family's perfect image shattered around her, that my mother left the room, went into her bedroom, and dialed my number. The call came just as we were sitting down for Christmas dinner. The lodge was filled with the warm, savory aroma of roast turkey and spiced cranberries. The table was groaning under the weight of a dozen different dishes, each one more delicious than the last. We had just raised our glasses for a toast when my phone, which I had purposefully left on the credenza across the room, began to buzz. I saw the name Eleanor flash on the screen, and my first instinct was to ignore it, to let it go to voicemail, to preserve the perfect, peaceful bubble I had so carefully constructed. But everyone at the table had seen me look at the phone. A curious silence fell. Aunt Carol gave me a knowing, gentle look that said, "It's okay, whatever you decide." I excused myself from the table, my heart suddenly hammering against my ribs. I walked over to the phone, took a deep, steadying breath, and answered it. "Hello, Mom." Her voice was nothing like it had been in our last conversation. The crisp, confident brightness was gone, replaced by a thin, wavering tone I hadn't heard since my grandfather passed away years ago. "Liam," she said, her voice small. The power is still out." I didn't say anything. I let the silence hang in the air, forcing her to continue. "It's a terrible storm. We're completely snowed in. The roads are closed. The airport is closed. We might be stuck here for days." She was reporting the facts, but what she was really doing was fishing for sympathy. She was expecting me to say, "Oh, Mom, that's awful. I'm so sorry." She was expecting me to feel bad for them. But I didn't. I felt nothing but a calm, cold clarity. "That's unfortunate," I said, my voice neutral. I saw the weather report. It looked serious. There was another pause. I could hear the faint sound of the wind howling in the background on her end of the line. "The picture you sent," she began, her voice cracking slightly. "That place. Where are you, Liam? It looks so warm." The word hung in the air between us. Warm. Everything their Christmas was not. "I'm at my home, Mom," I said simply. "In Wyoming. It's called Serenity Peak Ranch." I didn't elaborate. I didn't brag about the size or the cost. I just stated the fact. I let the name, the existence of it, do the work. "Your home?" she repeated, the confusion in her voice palpable. "But it's enormous. It looks like a resort." "I'm a developer, Mom. I develop properties. This is the one I developed for myself. The unspoken accusation in my tone was impossible to miss. This is the life I've been living while you weren't paying attention. She started to cry then, not loud sobs, but the quiet, hitching breaths of someone trying to maintain control. "Everything is a disaster, Liam," she whispered. "Your father and Ethan had a terrible fight. Chloe won't come out of her room. This was supposed to be perfect." I finally allowed a sliver of the ice in my veins to melt, not into sympathy, but into a hard, sharp point of truth. "Why was it supposed to be perfect, Mom?" I asked, my voice still quiet. What was the point of it all? To get a good picture for the Christmas card? To impress the people at the country club? Was any of it real? She didn't have an answer. She just kept crying softly. "And why are you calling me?" I pressed on, my voice hardening slightly. "What do you want me to do? I can't stop a blizzard in Colorado. I can't fix a fight between Dad and Ethan. And I can't make Chloe feel better about her lack of Wi-Fi. I just wanted," she faltered. "I just wanted to hear your voice." It was the most pathetic, manipulative thing she could have said. An attempt to fall back on a maternal bond she had spent years neglecting. And for a second, the little boy inside me, the one who had always craved his mother's approval, wanted to give in. But the 36-year-old man, the one who had built an empire from his own grit and vision, stood his ground. "You excluded me, Mom," I said, and the words were like stones, heavy and real. "You told me I wasn't the right image for your perfect family Christmas. You drew a line, and you put me on the other side of it. You don't get to call me for comfort now that your side has gotten uncomfortable. That's not how it works." I could hear her sharp intake of breath, the sound of a direct hit. She had expected a sympathetic ear, a willing, emotional caretaker. She had not expected a boundary. "I have to go," I said, my voice softening just a fraction. It was Christmas, after all. "My guests are waiting. We're just sitting down to dinner. I hope your power comes back on soon." Before she could respond, before she could launch into more tears or accusations, I ended the call. I stood there for a moment, the phone in my hand, my own reflection staring back at me in the dark glass of the window. My face was calm. My hand was steady. I had done it. I had held the line. I turned and walked back to the dining table. The room was quiet, my family's faces a mixture of curiosity and concern. I slipped back into my chair and picked up my wine glass. Uncle David raised his eyebrows in a silent question. I just smiled, a real, genuine smile. "It's okay," I said, my voice clear and strong. "Everything is perfectly fine." I raised my glass. "To family," I said. "The ones who show up." And as everyone around the table raised their glasses to meet mine, the sound of clinking crystal filled the warm, happy room, and the ghost of the call from Aspen began to fade. The mood at the dinner table after my mother's call was initially subdued. The ghost of her strained, tearful voice seeming to linger in the warm, candlelit air. My guests, bless their hearts, were trying to pretend they hadn't overheard the raw, painful edge of the conversation. They were too polite to ask directly what had happened, but the unspoken questions hung between us, as thick and heavy as the scent of roast turkey. I saw the concern in Aunt Carol's eyes, the quiet curiosity on Mark's face, the empathetic wince on Maya's. I knew in that moment that I had a choice. I could let the shadow of my parents' drama fall over us, poisoning the perfect atmosphere I had worked so hard to create, or I could face it head-on, not with anger, but with the quiet strength I had found this week. I chose the latter. I wasn't going to let them have that power over me. Not anymore. Not here. Not in my home. I set my wine glass down with a soft, deliberate click that drew everyone's attention. "That was my mother," I said, my voice calm and steady, projecting a confidence I was only just beginning to truly feel. "They're snowed in at their hotel in Aspen. The power is out. Apparently, their exclusive, perfect Christmas isn't going exactly as planned." I let the statement hang there, a simple declaration of fact without any hint of gloating. Aunt Carol, ever the empath, reached across the table and placed her warm hand over mine. Her touch was grounding. "Oh, Liam, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice full of genuine compassion. "That can't be easy for you to hear, no matter what's happened between you." I looked at her, at this woman who had been more of a mother to me in spirit than my own, and I felt a wave of gratitude so powerful it almost took my breath away. But I shook my head, a real, slow smile spreading across my face. "You know, Aunt Carol, 10 years ago, even 1 year ago, hearing that would have torn me up inside. A part of me would have felt guilty, responsible even. But tonight, honestly, it's okay. It's more than okay." I looked around the table, making eye contact with each of them in turn with Uncle David, whose quiet strength had always been a model for me, with Mark and Sarah, whose integrity and hard work represented the best of our family's roots, with Maya, whose artistic soul mirrored my own deepest passions. "For the first time in my adult life," I said, the truth of the words resonating deep in my bones, "I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be for Christmas, with the exact people I am supposed to be with. All of you." The honesty of the statement seemed to break the lingering tension, letting all the air out of the room. Mark, who had been listening intently, a thoughtful expression on his face, raised his glass of cider. "Well, I'll drink to that," he declared, his Vermont accent cutting through the quiet. "Their loss is our gain. Besides, I highly doubt the street. Regis is serving a turkey this good." The table erupted in a wave of relieved laughter, and just like that, the specter of my Aspen-bound family was banished. They had been exorcised not by anger, but by joy. The rest of the evening was one of the happiest of my life. It was joyous and loud, filled with second helpings of pie, terrible jokes from the Christmas crackers I'd bought, and a rowdy, fiercely competitive game of charades that went on late into the night, with Uncle David revealing an uncanny and frankly disturbing talent for miming. I didn't expect another call. I truly didn't. I assumed my blunt, unyielding stance with my mother would have sent a clear and unequivocal message: the emotional caretaker is off duty. I was wrong. The second call came the next morning, on Boxing Day, a day that felt lazy and peaceful. The blizzard had passed, leaving behind a world of impossible, sparkling beauty. I was down at the stables with Uncle David, the air crisp and smelling of pine and cold earth. We were examining the intricate joinery and the massive timber frames, a conversation between two men who understood and respected the art of building something to last. It was in the middle of this peaceful, perfect moment that my phone buzzed in my pocket, a jarring, unwelcome intrusion. I pulled it out, and my stomach immediately clenched into a tight, cold knot. The screen read, "Richard, my father." My stomach clenched. This was it. This was the real boss battle. My mother was the velvet glove, the wielder of guilt and emotional manipulation. My father was the iron fist, the bringer of judgment and raw, unfiltered power. "You should probably take that," Uncle David said quietly beside me, his eyes full of a deep and knowing understanding. He had known my father his whole life. He knew what this call represented. I nodded, my mouth suddenly dry. I walked out of the warm, hay-scented stables into the bright, cold morning, the brilliant sunlight reflecting off the snow with a painful intensity. I took a deep breath, the frigid air searing my lungs, and answered. "Dad," I said, my voice a flat, level plane. There was no preamble, no hello, no Merry Christmas, no pretense of civility. His voice was a low growl, vibrating with a rage that had clearly been simmering for over 24 hours, building pressure like steam in a sealed pipe. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Liam?" "I'm enjoying the day after Christmas with my family," I replied calmly, my eyes focused on the distant, unshakable peaks of the Tetons. I would not be shaken either. "What are you doing?" "Don't play games with me," he barked, the sound distorted with fury. "Your mother is a complete mess. You upset her terribly. And this stunt, this entire, elaborate performance, flying out all the cast-off relatives, flaunting this This palace you've built in secret. This was a deliberate, calculated attack on your family. On me. I leaned my back against the rough wood of the corral fence, feeling its solid, unyielding strength. I watched one of the horses, a beautiful palomino named Sundance, graze peacefully in the snow, completely untroubled. I would be like Sundance. An attack? I said, my voice dangerously soft. Dad, let's be very clear about the sequence of events. I invited our family to my home for Christmas because I didn't want to be alone after my own parents, brother and sister, very deliberately and explicitly uninvited me from their celebration. You lit the match. I just refused to let you burn me with it. You know damn well what it is, he roared, and I could picture him perfectly, pacing the confines of that sterile hotel suite like a caged lion, his face florid, his hands balled into tight, white-knuckled fists. It's a power play. It's a pathetic, nouveau-riche display. You think you can throw your money around and embarrass us? You think that makes you a big man? The hypocrisy was so staggering, so utterly breathtaking, that for a moment I could only laugh. It was a short, sharp, bitter sound. A power play? I shot back, my own voice rising, the carefully constructed calm beginning to crack. You want to talk about power plays, Dad? Let's talk about them. A power play is raising your children to be in constant competition with each other. A power play is holding your love and approval hostage.